Hi, I'm Old Sneelock. Welcome to another episode of Old Sneelock's Workshop. We're going to talk about clamps. And since in this shop clamps are a wide and varied subject, I'm not going to try and compress it all into one 10-minute video. I'm going to break it up into several, and I'm going to try and stay with a timeline because that's the easiest way for me to talk about them. So I'll tell you the first ones that I got and work my way on through. And this is going to be over a period of time, and I'm not going to run one day and then the next and then the next. Otherwise, I'll end up with a series of clamp videos that everybody will be totally asleep by the end of. So we'll break this up and do it out over probably a week or two and kind of give you a day in between with something else to talk about. This clamp is one of the first ones that I got. Now, the very first one is lost in the annals of history. But I remember this one is showing up in a box of stuff that I got at an auction back when I was first starting to do the workshop over in Union City, the original Old Sneelock's Workshop. It doesn't have a foot on it, and that makes it so that it's not quite as good for clamping. If you try and clamp wood with this, you're just going to punch that ball right into the bottom of the wood, and it's going to totally mess up the thing that you're working on. So if you have one like this, it's probably a good idea to put a foot on it. But at the time, I didn't have the means or the need, so I didn't, and I probably never will. This is going to remain just an old clamp that I had when I first started out. It's a super clamp, Hargrave, 6-inch, number 44. Cincinnati Tool Company, patent number 1918469. Steel, forged, solid as a rock. I mean, I've never managed to bend it. And I use this in a variety of things, welding up truck frames and all kinds of things, because this is one of the original clamps. And it's a big one. You can put a lot of force on it. I never bent the handles, but somebody did. Looks like probably got pounded on. But it's a good clamp. When we bought the house in Union City, it didn't have storm windows on the upstairs. It had them on the downstairs, but not on the upstairs. And the upstairs is where we wanted to have the bedroom. And when we bought the house, the front room, which was about 13 by 15, same size as the living room downstairs, was just a junk room. They had stuff stored in it. They had not done anything with the room from, well, looks like about 10 years after the house was built on. They lived downstairs. So the wallpaper was peeling off. It had a big hole in the wall where they'd taken out a chimney, and it was in pretty sad shape. When we bought the house, we had almost 2 weeks before we could move in, but John let us go in and work on the house. So we went through the upstairs and took off all the old paper and painted the walls and patched the plaster and fixed everything all up. But the windows were in pretty sad shape. They didn't leak, but they were in pretty sad shape. They needed to be painted badly. They'd been left dry for almost 100 years. So we went through and painted the windows. And when we moved in, which was late in the year, I looked at it and said, holy cow, these things leak like the dickens. Not water, air. The warm air in the house was just flooding out through the upstairs, and the cold air was pouring in. So I decided I needed storm windows. So I went and priced storm windows. We'd pretty much maxed ourselves out buying the house and moving. So I thought, well, I bet I could make them. Yeah, I actually just thought, well, I'll just make windows. So One of the things we did is I bought a table saw, a Craftsman contractor saw. I know, it's not the world's greatest saw, and it's not a cabinet saw, and it's not a fancy cast iron, huge monster of a thing, but it was a good saw. It still is. My son has it now. There's no room here for it. I took the contractor saw and cut up the wood and made all the mortise and tenon joints and fitted everything together. And then when I went to put it together, I didn't have any clamps big enough to hold the windows. Not a problem. I went out and bought these Jorgensen pony clamps, pipe clamps. Actually, these two. Because this is what I used to put the windows together with. I didn't have a workbench. I set them on sawhorses, leveled up the sawhorses and set these on it, and assembled my first set of windows. These are great. Precision clamps they're not, but they are straight, and if you remember that you've got pipe here and not bridge crane material, you can hold quite a bit of weight with them. The lock is adjustable on them, so you can set this for pretty much anything as long as you got a pipe long enough to reach. And you can add pipe on this thing and go out as far as you want to go. Oh, something I wanted to kind of mention. Pony clamps come with a little spring that goes over the end of the pipe thread, protects the pipe thread. Well, as time went on, I found that these pop bottle caps work perfectly for protecting the thread on the end of that pipe. You screw that on there and keeps it from getting dinged up. So you can put a coupling on it, stick another piece of pipe on it, and stretch it out as far as you want to go. Great clamps to have. I recommend everybody have pairs. I originally started out with 2, and I really needed 3, but that's been the story of my life. Begin a job with 1 clamp because that's all you've got. Recognize that you need 2, then you need 4, and then before you know it, you've got a wall full. So that was the pony clamps that I got. Now, I ran into another job that I needed a clamp for. I worked for WBCK over in Battle Creek as a advertising salesman. Yeah, it's not my forte, it's not what I'm really good at. I do it, and I've done it, because that's how you make a living. You work and do what you gotta do. But the big thing I like doing is making things. Well, we went on what's called a remote, and the remote is where you take a radio broadcast unit, which is a small little, and I forget the name of the thing, there was a special name for it that they called it. But anyways, it was a remote broadcast unit. You put it in the radio station van, and you drove to wherever you were going to have the remote. In this case, it was a parking lot. We were going to have a remote for a car dealer over in Marshall, Michigan. And we were far enough out that we were right on the edge of where you could make good broadcast connection with the radio. So we had to walk around with a radio antenna and try and find the proper place where you could get a good signal. And I thought that was kind of awkward. But I was the gopher on that job because I was the advertising salesperson that sold the remote. So I was out there to help the radio talent, the voice talent, set up the job and make sure that it worked. So he was busy trying to get the radio working, and I was walking around with the antenna. We finally got a signal and set it all up, and the broadcast went well, and I said, you know, there's got to be a better way. So the TV station in town had a much bigger budget than the radio station. They had a antenna that was on a powered mast that came up out of the center of the van and took the antenna up 25 or 30 feet in the air. I said, wow, that'd be nice, but that's way beyond my capability. So I went and bought some PVC pipe, and turns out that 1.5 inches slips right inside 2 inch. So I took some 2-inch PVC pipe and some 1.5 inch PVC pipe, and I put a rope on the 1.5" PVC pipe and dropped it down inside the 2" pipe so that you could take the 10-foot section, set it up against the side of the van, pull on the rope, raise the other 10-foot section of 1.5" up, and take your antenna up about 15 to 18 feet. But there was no way to clamp it down. There was no way to latch it to anything. That's when I bought the first one of these. Now this isn't the original. That one is still with the radio station, last I heard. They were still using that mast. This Irwin Quick Grip, I was able to grab a hold of the gutter of the van and clamp that 2" PVC pipe to the side of the van and then raise the mast, and it worked. Worked quite well. We got a lot better signal. So that was number 3 clamp that I got. And once I saw that and how well it worked, even though they were expensive, I said if I have the opportunity, I'm going to get more of these. Over time, that led me to getting Jorgensen clamps. Now the Irwins are nice, no doubt about it, but the Jorgensens, much better. Much bigger handle on the grip. For one thing, this is a bigger clamp, but also the grip is longer. The release is easier too. The release is back in here, and you can take this off and turn it around, clamp it onto this end, and turn this into a spreader. So this was a multi-purpose tool. It's called a Jorgensen ISD 6" bar spreader clamp, 150 millimeter, part number 33006. Really like these. Jorgensen went out of business. They were put under by knockoffs. Yeah, lots of companies made knockoff clamps like this. Once the design was out there in the market, not every country follows the patent rules, so there were a lot of companies that just made junk and passed it off as a clamp. If you see something like this, I don't care how the price looks, I don't care how badly you need a clamp. If you buy this clamp, you didn't get a clamp. You got a broken piece of crap just waiting to happen. This one, I try and buy clamps or get clamps in pairs. That way if you're doing something and you've got 2 ends on everything, pretty much normal thing to have, you got a clamp for one end and a clamp for the other. Well, I bought this pair and I hooked this one up. First job I was going to use it on, slid it in, locked it on, went like that, and the latching mechanism on the inside broke. That's why you see this screw and bolt here. I took it apart, which there's 5 screws on the side of the handle, and I pulled that out and took the latch mechanism out. The pin that held the latch mechanism was a piece of plastic. It's just this pin molded into the plastic. And it held the latch so that when you gripped on this, all the pressure went against that pin. Snapped it right off. First thing I did, grip that, snapped it right off. And I wasn't trying to pull anything tight. All I was trying to do is just hold 2 pieces of wood together. So I replaced the pin with this bolt and made it work just to see if I could. It's really not worth the trouble. I have this one. It's not broken because I've never used it. I said, okay, if I ever have a situation where I want to give somebody a clamp that I don't expect to get back, they're getting this one. This is one that I got as a gift. It works. It's not a great clamp. It's also designed to be a clamp spreader. You can flip the handle around and turn it into a spreader. Yeah, it'll do it, but it's not good at it. don't buy one of these. This is an Irwin. Came in a box of junk, so it's all rusty and crapped up, and I've never cleaned it yet. This size clamp is actually very handy. You can't weld with it very well because it's plastic. You will burn it up. I've lost one that way. But it's a nice handy size clamp. It's called the Quick Grip Bar Clamp. Part number is 00512 from the makers of Vice Grip Tools. 12 inch, 305 millimeter. Nice clamp. This is a Shopsmith clamp. Kind of a knockoff of the Irwin. Very similar body, very similar action. This came to me in a box of junk. It's a 6 inch, 150 millimeter Shopsmith, part number CA3011. Nice clamp, works quite well. Just like the Irwin's, nice solid clamp. Now once I had a shop, I started collecting tools to use in the shop. One of the first ones that I got is some C-clamps. This is a Cincinnati 4-inch standard. Good clamp. You'll never go wrong with a Cincinnati. Strong, tough, holds up well. Not a great welding clamp because if you tick the thread with a welder, you're gonna screw it up and you end up filing the thing back into a normal use. But if you remember what you're doing and keep the thread on the bottom side so you don't get weld spatter on it, this will make a really good clamp for you. You all know that I like going antique hunting. Well, this is an antique. Anytime you see a clamp like this, you know it's pre-1920. This one's a little twisted because this is wrought iron. It's a forging, it's not cast. This is cast steel. This frame is not cast. This is forged. It's a good little clamp. I don't use them unless I'm in a desperate situation and need that many clamps. Very few jobs actually require every clamp that I own. But I keep these around just because they're very cool. I like them. And that's enough for the first round of clamp talk. We'll probably have another video coming out Wednesday or Thursday when I'll talk about some of the other clamps that I've got. If you have any suggestions for a new video, questions about today's video, or any of the other videos on the channel, just drop a note in the comments. You know I read them all. Thanks for watching.
This video is not to be viewed by anyone under the age of 13 in the U.S. or 16 in the European Union, without the express written permission of the parents or legal guardians of the underage person. Such written permission must be on file at the local government entity in charge of enforcing the rules and regulations established by the FTC. Anyone violating these terms is admitting by default that they hold harmless the owners and operators of this channel. Any and all questions should be addressed to your local branch of the FTC.